I'd like to introduce currently Superintendent of San Francisco, a dear friend, Carlos Garcia.
I don't know about you, but it was really a treat to hear all these presenters, and especially I really enjoyed the student. So I hope you do win. You know, I was student body president myself, and I led walkouts and everything. So, every principal knew me by first name, and so did the superintendent. And it wasn't always the nicest names they thought of me, but here us revolutionaries just cut our hair and we continue doing the work. I will tell you, one of the things that you've mentioned up here that I am proud of in the last 5 years in San Francisco is that we're probably the only place in the country that actually has a strategic plan that under student achievement, and it's very San Francisco-ish, and at first everybody thought, you can't have that in your strategic plan. But we actually call it out, and we call it joyful learning. That, one of our objectives is, if you go on our strategic plan, it's called beyondthetalk.org. You'll see that we spend a lot of time talking about if you want to improve student achievement, you have to have joyful learners. And if you can't create an environment that makes kids excited about learning, then you're not going to get there. The other thing we're doing really, really well that you may want to check someday is, especially with the brain activity that you were mentioning, we took 6 of the toughest schools in San Francisco, and probably the best one is Visitation Valley Middle School. If you get a chance to see it, they actually do meditation. We call it quiet time because it's taboo to call it meditation. But in San Francisco, we can get away with it. And they do 20 minutes of quiet time right as school starts, and they do 20 minutes right before school ends. And I will tell you, the dramatic effect it has had in the lives of children is phenomenal. I mean, we have radically taken the worst schools, and it's funny because we think of intervention in very traditional ways that don't work. And this intervention has done more than any intervention I've ever seen in my 37 years in education. And so if you ever get a chance to see that, you ought to look at it because it really has transformed lives of barrio and ghetto kids like nothing else we've ever done. This was a really fun discussion, and what I am going to do is I want to open it up for people to ask questions. But please, what I will ask you is that ask a question, okay? I know everybody has a story to tell, but the purpose of this is that here we have this great panel up here as an opportunity to pick their brains. And I guess I'll start off with one just simply. It's easy to talk about theory, but as a superintendent, you talked about courageous superintendents. There's a lot of other issues that are involved, and that is that, we have a society of parents who still believes in what they term as the good old days. And first of all, they weren't that good, but everybody has this myth in their mind about how it was when they were in school and how it was so much better. Well, it really wasn't that much better. It was just as boring then as it is today. Because one thing that's consistent is that especially high schools haven't changed very much, since even our grandparents went to school. So to try to persuade not only teachers, but also have somewhat of a paradigm shift in society in terms of what schools ought to be is a big challenge for all of us. So I'd like to ask the panel, what ideas might you have in not only, it's one thing to talk about what happens in school, and another thing to talk about the legislature and all, the standardized to death stuff and the testing to death, but how do we go about changing a culture that still lives too much in the present and, quite honestly, in the past and not in the future? Yes, would one of you want to take it on?
Is this on? I don't know. Are they on? They're not on?
It's on.
Okay. So we have a number of districts in Ed Leader 21 that have really taken on the challenge of community building. So the one I'll share with you is Virginia Beach, 60,000 students, a lot of Navy SEAL families on the East Coast. And they and their board created a community engagement strategy around their 21st century outcomes that led to having 1,000 citizens in the convention center ratify their plan for 21st century outcomes. And the superintendent now says, look, it's tough because we now have to actually produce what we promised, but we've got the community on board saying, critical thinking, communication, collaboration, global competence are part of our model. So I agree with you. When I go around the country, I meet parents and obviously teachers who are somewhat resistant. But I think that the courageous superintendents and the courageous districts have gone about the business of saying, we're going to actually, in writing, create a model that articulates something more than just content mastery and get the community to buy into it by a major, major outreach process. And those communities, I think, have a deep community support for the direction then that their schools are headed in.
I think, is mine on? No?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is.
okay. When I go into a district to work with teachers, I also ask if I can meet with parents. Because if we don't educate parents, well, why aren't we getting the spelling test home on Friday, and why aren't they doing it the way, would you go to a doctor who hadn't, had any new staff development or professional development in 30 years? And it doesn't take long for parents to begin, as long as we treat them as intelligent human beings and explain to them why these changes need to happen.
We need more Annas, I think. I was talking to her. I have a daughter who is 13. She constantly skips school. She skipped 2 days, now she's at debate. So that's the only thing she likes. I want her school to be a debate school. And I think there are really about 3 things we need to really work on. Number 1, we got to stop the kind of continuous spread idea that schools can be measured by test scores, by rankings. I think, I know someone produced a good video that we constantly outscore other people, so what? I'm serious, I'm not attacking your product, it's great, go do it, I was talking like, even if we reach the number 1 in terms of PISA scores, so what? Like, that's something, I basically try to avoid telling anybody that scores matters. And so that's one thing. I think we had a 20 years, actually 40 years of school bashing to say how bad we are. We always use that to indicate. That's the number 1 thing with legislatures. The second thing, I think we have spent too much money trying to turn in school leaders not as policy entrepreneurs, but turn them into bureaucrats. There's no professional development, no leadership training to heighten them. I think this country needs to spend more money on making school leaders as policy entrepreneurs so they can lead. Because now I think this country is beaten down as that. So that's the third thing I think we need to do is to work like this. Unless we can do is that I think works like Ken K is doing with Leadership 1 is that today's technology, unfortunately, has been used as a managing tool by the dictator to manage schools and student data-driven, not to liberate people. That's why in the right way and wrong way. Today's technology can really liberate us into different, we can collaborate not only across state, but also cross globally. But if you think about it, over the past 20 years, we seldom had a chance to sit down to rethink the new opportunities technology and globalization bring to us. We've been trying to fix a machine. We're trying to fix the horse wagon in order to go to the moon, which then doesn't really work, but we're still trying to fix it.
Mm-hmm. Great.
I think it takes a lot for people to accept change. It's scary to go into something new that you're not used to, and I think especially with education, because if you're looking at it from your parents' point of view and you're putting your son or your daughter into a new education system, dealing with project-based learning or working with the 4 C's, that's just something that you didn't do growing up. It's got to be scary. So I think in order for it to happen, to be able to implement it, we need to let everyone know about it. Let everyone know the success that it's held and why it's important, why we want to do it. Maybe hold workshops to let people know. I know my school, when we recruit new teachers, they have go through this PBL workshop where they have to learn about project-based learning, how we do things, that sort of thing. So making those available to the public, I think, is very necessary. And I agree about obviously making testing less important.
Are your parents Asian?
My dad is.
Okay. Are the tiger moms?
What?
Tiger mama and tiger dad?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just thinking, how do you get to do this, right? Not many Asians get to do what you do.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's open it up for questions. Questions? Please raise your hand and come to the microphone. Thank you.
Mark Morrison, is this working? Yep. Hey, I was really intrigued. I really enjoyed the description of 2 educational systems, kind of between China and the U.S. I really enjoyed that. And it almost sounded like there was an advocacy for we need rememberers. In one category, people are really good at remembering. In the other category, we're trying to develop thinkers, right? So kind of between those two, is it really either or? Is it really either or? Do we just need people that can think, but maybe aren't really good at remembering? So I'm just curious, and it's probably more for Dr. and for Pat.
It's really hard to think about nothing. I mean, you do have to have something to think about, obviously. And I did not mean to suggest that facts and factoids are not important. Certainly they are. But when they become the be-all and end-all, that's the problem, without the thinking. That was...
Yeah, thanks, Pat. I think when I was laying those out, they're not mutually exclusive. But the problem is that often in our process, in the traditional process, in Asia it's expressed more, when we treat factoid facts or memorization as the ceiling, as the ultimate goal, you sacrifice. Because once you sacrifice curiosity, imagination, sacrifice anything, the confidence, you're not even going to be interested in that anymore. But so that means the cost is very high. I think when I view America, I agree with Ken and Pat. By the way, I didn't mean to glorify American education. American education is a mess. Seriously, because I said American education, I have another one that said, all education so far, globally speaking, except a few good trials like ASU, Summerhill schools, and some of these schools, most of the schools are going through the model of like sausage making. It's about reduction. We take a lot of human diversity, we run through 12 years through a core curriculum, whatever it is, then reduce them into what we call employable skills. Standardized skills, a few people can have, a lot of people have similar skills. That's what we do. American education, we have Lady Gaga, Steve Jobs, we have Anna's because it's a broken sausage making machine. You know, it's not that we teach more creativity, we kill it less successful in the Asian systems. So I think the first thing we need to do is to recognize schooling actually sometimes can hurt people. That's the first thing I want to emphasize, because once you force people to hurt their feelings, their creativity, their confidence, their happiness, you have lost the ability to regain that. But if people are interested, I mean, look at, say, if Lady Gaga is not stupid or ignorant, she's driven, she's going to find something. The problem today is we have kind of put the cart in front of the horse. Is that the American saying? You know, that's fine. It's a Chinese saying. It's an old Chinese proverb. Don't put the cart in front of the horse. So that's what I think we need to be individually driven, a personalized, strength-based learning, and all the facts-based that will come will be as sought after, not imposed upon.
I'm not sure. I'm really struggling with this issue of whether the American system was always broken. So, and I guess the only reason I want to, I think in the 50s and 60s when I was in elementary school, the model was an appropriate model for people who were going to automated factories and basically doing the same thing over again. And so I guess at the time, memorization and repeating the same function was actually not so terrible in a model in which that's basically what most jobs were, which is you were working in a big hierarchical structure, you were on the assembly line, and they wanted you to keep cranking out the same task while being able to answer the quiz at the end of the week. So I guess I don't want to subscribe to the notion that the system was pretty appropriate for the model of work at the time. Mm-hmm. Now the disconnect is just unbelievably so. And I think the thing, particularly for the great vendors we've had around the room, all of us, and this is a struggle that we have, because I agree with you that you can't critically think about nothing. But I don't think we've been honest about the fact when kids can Google the answer in 5 seconds, then the real issue is not the memorization. It's whether or not they have the basic structure in place of the knowledge so that you understand the basics of biology. But you don't have to know that the name was the Protali, or the frond. You can probably figure that out, but you need to know what the basic structures of each of the disciplines are. So I think, and I'd be interested in Pat's reaction to this, but I think we're going to be more open to the fact that as we get clearer about how you have instant access and as more students have instant access during the school day, then the context of instant access to the information in a broader context of understanding I think will be clearer to us. But in the current climate, the kids are being forced to memorize in a context in which they know they could find the answer if they had to instantly.
But isn't that a threat? I mean, you have Justice O'Connell trying to, create across this country so people understand history better. They understand government, civil, all these different things. That's what they're pushing now, the new thing, okay? And I think the threat for a lot of people is, as you mentioned, that you could Google and find information, but the biggest threat for people is, will people not, what is important then? Is it important to know your history? Is it important what is a basic skill of what you ought to know? And I think that's where the push is right now in education.
But I also think one of the new skills is going to be whether to determine what they're finding on the internet has any veracity or not. There is junk on the internet.
There is? Really?
Yeah.
You mean Wikipedia isn't true?
You are so cute. Isn't he? I typed in brain and education one day, several million hits. I read that round flashcards, research proves, round flashcards work better than square ones. I mean, that is absolute nonsense. Or that drinking lots of water will raise test scores. How would you measure that?
The bathroom? I don't know. Yes, we have a lot of questions here. Go for it.
So, given that you guys have presented the solutions, and it's not the first time that we're hearing about how tests are kind of stifling the creativity, so it's out there. It's been out there for some time now. So what are the countervailing interests that is precluding us from kind of moving forward, and then how do we knock down those interests? How do we move forward on this thing? I mean, because it's 10 years, 15 years now, we know that test taking is not going to get it done, so there must be some countervailing interests. What are they, and how do we knock them down?
Well, I mean, I was, two things actually. Before I came, I had a meeting with a very small group, a school in the state of Washington, very rural. They had about only 17 staff members. Imagine how small the school is. They heard me somewhere, they read my book, said, hey, we want to do something. I said, okay. So I said, well, come down. They drove 4 hours to meet with my office. We spent I actually videotaped the session, talked to the superintendent. I said, why do you have nothing? Why do you want to do this? You want to be global, be creative, be all the entrepreneurs and nothing. They said, well, we are enthusiastic. I said, are you sure your community can go with it? They said, yeah. I said, what can I do? I said, well, I will be happy to work with this. I will offer a course just as a professional development, training our whole staff, 17. Let's design it. So I think it goes back to really what Ken was talking about, Carlstone. It's this courageous leadership. I really feel, honestly, when I go around different countries, America today perhaps has the least inspired, least courageous school leaders, superintendents. I mean, I've seen many other places that do a lot. I'm sorry to say that, guys, but I mean, there are very few are using federal, others as excuses. We have more money, seriously, we have more money. We don't produce a good test scores, that's good. But we are trying to reduce this $10,000 education to a $10 education to say, a $10 education can buy you good scores. $10,000 should buy you a lot more, but we are not doing this thing. I really blame ourselves because we have been training people to comply. Where a lot of professional development today is about something you can use tomorrow. I really hate this kind of idea. If it's something you can use tomorrow in your classroom, that's not inspiring or big enough for you to change. I think to the professional development, teacher education, leadership training has to think about changing their mind. Ourselves have to have mindset change. So I really blame our school of education. Like I'm in one of them, I always blame myself first, so you don't have to criticize me. But I also blame people who are in the field who are not there, takes their job seriously to say, we need to create and protect our children's future. My job, when it's best done, is to be a good leader, a protector of children's dream, not the bureaucrats who fill out the forms on behalf of governments. I think that's a big thing we need to change.
I agree.
But let's answer the question. The answer is what to do. I would agree with you, and I'll quantify this. There are about 14,000 superintendents in the country, district, local superintendents. I'd say currently 300 or 400 of them are really prepared to step up in spite of federal and state policy and enunciate a vision that's compelling to the kinds of things the four of us have been talking about. But I also want to recognize that they're in a bifurcated environment, right? So you still, particularly, I was with a group of private schools in Southern California 2 days ago. They don't have to operate under No Child Left Behind or under the Common Core when it comes. So it's very challenging to operate in this schizophrenic environment, which is you're trying to build, assuming that you've just agreed to do it, you've got the school wanting to do this, but you've still got statewide assessments that are doing rote memorization while the students are doing project-based learning. Now, in most schools that have done this, the kids aren't doing worse because they're critically thinking. Their grades are going up. But on the other hand, I think we have to recognize that leaders are, for the time being, until policymakers get their act together, they're going to be in a schizophrenic environment where they're being assessed by both what maybe the great assessments that they're coming up with, but also lousy assessments that other people are posing. So here's the concrete thing I want to suggest. The place that this conference could go is to get the California superintendents that are part of that 300 or 400 and begin to network with each other about and create support for one another about being embracing that schizophrenic environment for the moment. Obviously, you'll push a little on the policy, but what they really need, the thing I found when I interviewed the first 30 superintendents, it's a lonely position, and they don't have a whole lot of people to talk to in the profession that are willing to be bold about the work. So the idea, whether you're in Ed Leader 21 and do it nationally, or where you're within a network that could come out of this conference and willing to do it in California, you need to take the bold leaders and create a support structure for yourselves. You're not going to be able to do this by yourself.
Next question.
Dr. Zoa, I had actually returned from China. I was over there for a month, 10 schools over there and 12 in India. And I agree with a lot of what you say, even though yesterday I gave a little presentation here and maybe people wouldn't think that because I only had about 10 minutes, but I do agree with many of your things. But I would disagree in the fact that, some of the things Tom Friedman brings up, you're definitely, in contrary. But I know that one of the things about China, in the last 25 years, no nation has done ever what China's done, grown this fast, this powerful, this strong. And I look at reports by Thomson Reuters where China has surpassed the US now in patents. Surely they're not the same quality, we know that, but their analysts say they're well on their way and they'll be there shortly. And Goldman Sachs predicts China and India as major R&D capitals of the world. So I wouldn't play them out, and I'm wondering, you're saying they're not very innovative, but the sense of the matter is they're incredible copiers, and that's a path that they've chosen. The next step will be innovation and leading companies, and I'm wondering what your take on that is.
Thank you. I think first of all, I really think Thomas Friedman, a lot of them they understand globalization in a different framework than I do. First, I think we have 7 billion people on Earth. It's not going to be one versus the other. We have to learn how to collaborate with each other. I think Apple computers, actually, surprisingly, I have a little thing I can show you, actually. Apple computers build a global supply chain, which is, I don't really have this. We have to tell people to do creative work. We have to do people do the basic work. And that's the unfortunate part. I feel like when, I think Keith Devlin of Stanford, the mathematician, wrote about when all math can be taught online, what do we do now? What kind of mathematicians Americans can produce? It's the creative entrepreneur. So the issue actually goes back to, Ken was talking about, in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, America had a lot of basic workers. We need about 2 million people working for Henry Ford. The basic skills, you don't need a passion to do that. You can all train to do that. That's job going to China. China is sending that to Bangladesh. Bangladesh is sending to Africa right now. So what's happening over there is that we have a long global supply chain of basically outsourced to people. The problem is that American education today, we have to be trying to occupy the creative supply chain there. And that's American education can do and should do because of the cultural differences and also because of resources. I could have become a Justin Bieber, for example. But I didn't. I didn't. Because in China, I did not have the access, Pat. I did not have the same stimulus. I did not, in my village. I only heard is cow moves. That didn't work. So what I think about China right now, China's struggle is trying to be creative. China won't be creative. They can copy, they can continue to copy. I was actually trying to show you some data. For example, the big debate, is China a real innovation dragon or a paper tiger? Here, China, since the most recent data available in terms of patents, China has claimed in its own office over 200,000 filings. US is 400,000. That's internal. That Thomas Friedman uses that data to say China is rising quickly. Here's we go, some different data. The patents, that's innovative patent versus improvement patents, different, and patents recognized by different organizations. Generally, European Union, US, and I think the international one that's in Geneva. 3 organizations sanctioned in 2008. China had 473 patents, only recognized by 3. US had 14,000, Europe had 14,000, and China, 50% of the 400 patents are made by multinational subsidies in China. So China's indigenous only 200 patents. That's why China is doing this. China is also trying to buy talents. They spend a lot of money buying US graduates going home, but it won't work because they do not have the sustained part. Also, you look at the higher level manufacturing jobs returning to the US because they do not have the same kind of quality. We can never discount anybody, actually, no country, but we need to figure out how do we work with others. So it's very different sets of data we think about.
Great
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next question. We only have about 3 or 4 minutes, so go ahead.
Thank you. I am so impressed by Anna and all of what she had to say, and I want you to be able to help me with the question that I have for you this morning. And it has to do with adding the sea of confidence to this 21st century skills list that we are considering in this conference. Because for me, that was a major aha this morning, and when I saw you talking and I saw the next generation speaking through you, I also want you to consider in your answer those students who are with you, who are not necessarily part of the model minority, but are just like me, English language learners. I was never reclassified, by the way. I picked up a couple of degrees here and there, but I couldn't wait for reclassification, and came to this country at 16, and I got all the labels on my forehead, I guess. But Anna, how would confidence play in these 21st century skills so that we can include not only the traditional student, but all of these other students who are part of this tremendous achievement gap that we're experiencing? Thank you.
Well, with my school, obviously, since we are PBL, the way that we do things is we have presentations at the end of every project, which normally involve getting in front of your entire class of like 20 to 50 students and presenting your final product, much like what I did just here, a Prezi, And with that comes the confidence that is, a necessity. And I'll tell you, we've got English language learners at my school. We've got a wide variety of different kinds of people at my school. We've got people who have never spoken in front of a crowd larger than maybe like 10 people coming to the school their freshman year and having to do a presentation in front of 50 people. And it's very intimidating because I was in that position. I luckily went to River School, so I learned how to do these presentations beforehand and gained that confidence at a younger age. But I can tell you that you see transformation from a freshman student, even to sophomore, to junior, to their senior year, be able to do the presentations to their peers, to a panelist of people, grading them, putting grades down for their future pretty much, on what they're presenting. And you've got people who started out at this school inside their turtle shell, so shy. And the way that New Tech works is either it helps you ease your way out of your shell, or it kind of cracks it open for you and then pushes you out. It comes along with the education and with the presentations that you give at the end of every project that you do. The confidence is either you learn how to do it or you have to learn how to do it. So there's really no other option.
Yes.
First of all, I don't know whether you've had any post-college job offers yet, but I want you to know, I want you to know that as of today, you have your first one, and when you graduate college, you would be, I've been doing this for over 10 years, and you are the best ambassador for 21st century learning that I've met.
Incredible. You know, I guess to wrap it up, you know, the old saying that if you continue to do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got, right? And think about it. You know, Tom Torgerson mentioned that 70% of the people in California don't have children in schools. And think about this, that of the children that are in schools, they don't look like those 70%. So the challenges become even bigger because we are a very diverse society, and if you look at the achievement gap, we're not closing it. So just from an economic point of view, if we don't really resolve these types of issues, and I agree that, you know, in this country we've become like sheep. We just follow the lead, and the lead is, you know, can lead you off a cliff, and yet we're all there going over the cliff. And I think we've been doing that for a heck of a long time. And it reminds me of when I was in college, I read this great author called Herbert Marcuse, who wrote a book called One Dimensional Man. And in the book, he talked about the great refusal. If you ever saw the movie Network, where you're mad as hell and you're not going to put up with it anymore. I think as long as we continue to be sheep, we shouldn't be surprised that we keep sliding down and down. I think this conference is not about being sheep, but about standing up and saying we're headed down the wrong path. Let's thank the panel and thank everybody for being here today.